do? It's your boy Wavy. Stay Wavy TV back at y'all with another one. Let's get it, man. Let's talk about that boy Errol the True Spence Jr. So the last time we seen Errol Spence in a boxing ring was last year. I believe it was in June or July against Terrence Buck Crawford, where he pretty much got obliterated, got his ass whooped, ended up getting stopped. I believe it was in round 7. And since then, man, we know that Errol Spence Jr. did have eye surgery after that fight. I believe he had some cataracts removed, and he actually blamed that on being a part of the reason why he lost to Terrence Crawford. He said because of the cataracts, he was having trouble seeing the punches, hit him in the face. You understand what I'm saying? But the last time that we seen Errol Spence Jr. publicly, it was twice, right? The first time, he showed up to the fight with Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora. It was supposed to be Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman, but Keith Thurman ended up getting injured and having to have surgery. So, that's why it was Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. Tim Tszyu suffered a bad cut on his forehead, which caused him to have trouble seeing, and he ended up losing to Sebastian Fundora. And then we seen Errol Spence Jr. walk into the ring and basically called Sebastian Fundora out for a fight. And Sebastian Fundora accepted the challenge, right? They both took a picture together. And that fight was supposed to be slated for, I believe, October, November. But since then, Sebastian Fundora's manager has come out publicly and said that negotiations between Sebastian Fundora and Errol Spence have been terrible because Errol Spence still doesn't have a trainer. He fired Derek James. Derek James actually filed a lawsuit against Errol Spence claiming that he owes him millions of dollars for the fight with Terrence Crawford. And then Errol Spence countersued Derek James, basically saying that he doesn't owe him a damn thing, right? So Errol Spence still doesn't have a trainer. He's not in fighting shape. That's what Sebastian Fundora's manager said. Errol Spence is not currently in fighting shape. And they haven't agreed to a date. Negotiations have pretty much stalled, and the fight is off, right? So now Sebastian Fundora's manager wants him to fight Terrence Crawford, and it's been ordered that Sebastian Fundora and Terrence Crawford, they have 30 days. They have 1 month to basically pick a date, figure out where the fight's going to be at, and make this fight happen. So most likely we are going to get Terrence Buck Crawford versus Sebastian Fundora in November instead of Errol Spence versus Sebastian Fundora. Now, the last time we seen Errol Spence was at Frank Martin's fight against Gervonta Tank Davis. He showed up to the press conferences. He was at the fight. He was, did a couple of interviews before the fight happened, did a couple of interviews after the fight happened. And Errol Spence looked to be in good spirits, man. But, since then, Errol Spence has been completely ghost on social media. We're used to Errol Spence on Twitter. Errol Spence has not been tweeting. The only time we see Errol Spence, if you follow Errol Spence on Instagram, you see Errol Spence post a lot of videos and pictures with his kids, with his girlfriend and his kids. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I did see an interview where the interviewer was asking Errol Spence, does he want to be the unified champion at 154? And he said no. He said, look, man, I plan on just having 1 or maybe 2 fights and I'm done. You understand what I'm saying? Like, Errol Spence is basically signaling that he's pretty much ready to retire, man. He wants to be there for his kids. We all know, listen, Errol Spence has taken a lot of punishment outside of the sport of boxing, right? He had the DUI incident where he was drinking and driving. He was driving his Ferrari after he had got done drinking. Had a very bad accident, flew out of his Ferrari, smashed into the concrete, and somehow he survived. Had no major injuries, right? And right after that car crash, he fought Danny Garcia, beat Danny Garcia by unanimous decision, right? Now, what people don't know is Errol Spence had 2 more car accidents after that fight with Danny Garcia. It just wasn't publicized. You understand what I'm saying? But, you can go look up the interviews. Errol Spence, he confirmed that he had 2 more accidents after that. And he got banged up a little bit again, right? But after Danny Garcia, we seen Errol Spence beat the shit out of your Dennis. Because remember, Errol Spence was supposed to fight Manny Pacquiao, but Errol Spence had an injury with his eye, right? So Manny Pacquiao ended up fighting Ugas, right, for the belt, and then Errol Spence fought Ugas after Ugas beat Manny Pacquiao. Errol Spence beat Ugas in dominant fashion, right? And then after that, that's when he went on to fight Terrence Crawford. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, right? It's a very high chance, because think about this, right? Errol Spence, for the second time, right? He's been out of the ring for more than a year. A lot of people don't remember this, but before Errol Spence fought Terrence Crawford, he was out of the ring for more than a year, right? So after his ass whooping that he took from Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. has once again been out of the ring for more than a year. That fight happened in what, June or July? Guys, we're in September now. So he's been out of the ring for like a year and 2 months, or a year and 4 months, right? This is ridiculous, man. Errol Spence, he's taking too much time out of the ring. And that's a part of the reason why he got his ass whooped the way he did by Terrence Crawford. Not by not being active. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. There's only one fight that I can see happening for Errol Spence Jr. right now. And that is against Keith one-time Thurman. Now, the reason why the fight makes the most sense for Errol Spence to fight Keith Thurman is because Keith Thurman is at 154 now, right? Just like Danny Garcia, he moved up to 154, had his first fight against Jose Benavidez, won that fight, right? Keith Thurman was supposed to have his first fight at 154 against Tim Tszyu before he got injured, right? Keith Thurman has had a lot of inactivity from boxing, right? Like, Keith Thurman, I mean, he's gone 2 years without fighting. You understand what I'm saying? Last time we seen Keith Thurman was against Mario Barrios. That was 2 years ago. You understand what I'm saying? So Errol Spence coming off his first loss, which he took a brutal beating, right? After that brutal beating, Errol Spence being inactive for more than a year, right? Remember, Errol Spence and Keith Thurman, they were supposed to fight each other back when Keith Thurman was the champion. Remember, Keith Thurman beat Danny Garcia for the belt, and then right after that, he beat Sean Porter, right? Those are the two most credible wins of his career. That was before he lost to Manny Pacquiao. And a lot of people forget, but at that time, that's when Errol Spence was on the come up. Errol Spence was the boogeyman at 147. And Errol Spence was calling out Keith Thurman in person and in social media. He was walking up on Keith Thurman in person. And Keith Thurman did not want to make that fight happen, right? So Keith Thurman ended up not fighting. He ended up losing the belt due to inactivity. And Errol Spence was able to get that belt. And then when Errol Spence became champion at 147, because remember, Errol Spence was supposed to fight Keith Thurman instead of Terrence Crawford. Al Heyman and the PBC, they wanted Errol Spence to fight Keith one-time Thurman before he fought Terrence Bud Crawford. Errol Spence denied that and went against Al Heyman and the PBC's wishes because Errol Spence doesn't like Keith Thurman, because when Keith Thurman was the champion and Errol Spence was calling him out, Keith Thurman was ducking Errol Spence. That was going to be the biggest fight in boxing. That fight probably would have been a bigger fight than what Errol and Terrence was, because Keith Thurman is a bigger pay-per-view boxing star than Terrence Crawford. And I know a lot of Terrence Crawford fans are going to leave comments denying that, but it's a fact. Keith one-time Thurman is a bigger pay-per-view star than Terrence Crawford is. At that time. That's when Terrence Crawford was signed to top-ranking Bob Arum, and Terrence Crawford, you know, he wasn't fighting nobody at 147 at the time, right? So you got Keith Thurman, who's extremely entertaining. He's a good trash talker, has a great resume, right? He's been at the only problem with Keith Thurman, he's been active, right? You got Errol Spence Jr., who's a pay-per-view star, right? Listen, let's be honest. Errol Spence right now is still a bigger, even after he lost to Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence right now is still a bigger star and a bigger name in boxing than Terrence Crawford. Anybody that denies that, you're delusional. Terrence Crawford just fought Majamov, a dude with 11 fights. The pay-per-view flopped. There was barely anybody in the arena. Nobody gave a fuck. And by the way, Terrence Crawford almost lost that fight. Whenever Errol Spence Jr. fights, people are gonna watch. People pay attention. So, in my opinion, Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman is a big fight. I think it'll do very good on pay-per-view because, once again, you know what the difference is between Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford? Keith Thurman is entertaining. Keith one-time Thurman is a great trash talker. People like Keith Thurman. People don't just like Keith Thurman as a boxer. They like Keith Thurman as a person because he talks trash, he's entertaining, he's very animated, right? And he knows boxing, and he's a skillful boxer. And he only has one loss against Manny Pacquiao, right? And then you got Errol Spence Jr. Everybody wants to know, damn, does Errol Spence still got it? Does Errol Spence still got that dog in him? Can Errol Spence still take punishment after what happened in the fight with Terrence Crawford? People want to know. People want to know, what is Errol Spence going to look like when he gets back in the ring? So mark my words. Errol Spence Jr., he's either going to retire or his next fight is going to be against Keith one-time Thurman. Mark my words. Because just like Errol Spence has been quiet on social media, you guys haven't noticed how quiet Keith Thurman is? Keith Thurman ain't been on Twitter. Keith Thurman ain't been on Instagram. You want to know why? Because Al Heyman and the PBC is working on making this fight official behind the scenes. That's why. Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman is going to happen before the end of the year, November or December. That's why we're not getting Errol Spence versus Sebastian Fundora. It's not because Errol Spence doesn't have a trainer. Nah, it's because he has a bigger fight where he's going to make more money. It's going to be a pay-per-view fight, right? And at the end of the day, Errol Spence beating Keith Thurman is way better on his resume than him beating Sebastian Fundora. We all know, before Sebastian Fundora put that cut on Tim Tszyu, he was losing that fight. Tim Tszyu was going to win that. Tim Tszyu was dominating. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm telling you guys, man, this could be the fight of the year, man. Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith one-time Thurman at 154? Bruh. Hey, I'm going to be honest with y'all, man. Don't sleep on Keith Thurman. I know he's been inactive, right? And listen, the only reason why I would say Errol Spence will win this fight is because of Keith Thurman's inactivity. If them boys would have fought at 147 when Keith Thurman was the champion, Keith Thurman would have won that fight. But Keith Thurman has just been too inactive for me to pick him beating anybody, to be honest with you guys, man. I'm just being honest. Keith Thurman ain't been fighting, bro. He ain't been in the ring. And whenever Keith Thurman fights again, bro, there's going to be a lot of ring rust, bro. There's going to be a lot of nerves. There's going to be a lot of nervousness, bro. The man ain't been in the ring for damn near 3 years. You understand what I'm saying? So let me know what you guys think about this fight. What is your prediction? Who do you think is going to win? Do you got him winning by unanimous decision? Do you got him winning by majority decision? Or do you got somebody winning by KO? I would pick Errol Spence Jr. to win this fight by majority decision, in my opinion. You understand what I'm saying? Like I said, I would put some money on Keith Thurman to win just because he would be the underdog, but I'm just not picking somebody that's been inactive as much as Keith Thurman to win a fight against anybody. So with that being said, it's your boy Wavy. Stay Wavy TV. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment. I appreciate everybody that watches my videos. We taking over this year, man. 2024. Let's get it. I'm out.